So I'm still doing all my livestock guardian dogs. They've been absolutely um, key in starting my farm. I've been expanding the farm as well to doing like a lot of meat birds, meat chickens, turkeys, like heritage breed turkeys, sheep and goats. Um, so when we last talked, I had the farm, and I had livestock, but I wasn't using the livestock to make money. Now that's kind of become part of my business as well. So having good quality livestock guardian dogs, um, you know, is super important. I've actually got another 20 acres that should be done being fenced this week, and we've already got 50 sheep to put out there. And they're going out with one of my Caucasian Acharkas and one of my Armenian Gampers. Um, and so, you know, Sheep are worth 500 to 600 bucks each before they've been processed. Once they've been processed and you're selling them at market, 1200 ish. Um, in individual meat cuts at the end consumer price level. So if a coyote's taking babies, or a whole pack of coyotes is taking an adult, um, that's a lot of money that you're losing. So entrusting that to my livestock guardian dogs. Um, I've definitely this year I'm doing less of the livestock guardian dog breedings because I already have the dogs that I need for my farm. So I've been working more on my band dog program and getting, the breed I would like to start, the Lone Star Mastiff, getting my foundation stock set for that, um, and ready to drop that as a new breed in the next year to 2 years. Yeah, absolutely. So kind of when I set out for this, I was looking for a dog that kind of had the best values of a livestock guardian dog, with the best values of your Neapolitan type Mastiff, Molosser breed dogs, as well as, um, a dog that had high prey drive, like a police canine, but also had high defense drive, like the livestock guardian dogs. Um, but a dog that was independent thinking, where you don't need a handler to make every decision. So unlike a Maale or a Dutch Shepherd, um, a dog that can think independently, but I also want it to be a good family dog. So it has to have an off switch. It has to not be bouncing off the walls 24/7. It has to be able to live in a family type environment, but still protect family when needed. And I'd like it to be tappable basically in prey or defense drive if you're doing decoy work and training with it, training it for a real life scenario. I want it to be able to switch back and forth out of prey drive and defense drive, more for an estate guardian, family guardian type dog. At this time, I've used a ton of different breeds, all of the almost all of the different Molosser breeds. I keep going back to the Neo. Um, there's a lot of things I really do like about it, and some things that are bad about it too. The health. If you get a purebred Neo, the health being one of those major things, and that's been a hurdle. Kind of breeding out health problems over the last 5 years and crossing in smaller, less wrinkled, less longer snouted dogs. So they have, good breathing. Um, I kind of have tiered the development of my breed, you could say, in terms of what I thought was most important first. First, I picked temperament, and genetic testing, and looking for clear dogs while maintaining a certain temperament. From there, I started looking at structure. Um, Once I had my temperament, my genetics, my genetic health down, really looking at the structure of the dog. And then from there, now I'm able to add color. And that's kind of the final aspect of, making, kind of having the complete package to say. Um, but as far as the breeds that I've used in it, Neo is probably the heaviest. Um, I've got German Shepherd and Dutch Shepherd, Caucasian of Charka, Central Asian of Charka, Armenian Gamper, Fila, Bulldog, Doggo Argentino, um, a lot of Presa, a little bit of Borbal. Um, I think those are most of the breeds that I've relied heaviest on. Oh, and Bull Terrier. Um, I've worked with Chad Maya a little bit and have used some of his Bull Terrier stock as well. I've got some game bred pit bull as well. So it's I've got a lot of mix in right now, and I've got quite a variation in size, um, temperament, and build structure. So now that I've got the color in, kind of my next step is going to be getting it down to type and consistency and that's going to involve some line breeding, but getting it to where every litter I'm producing kind of looks the same. They've got most of, these livestock guardian breeds, they've been around thousands of years. They have thousands of years of genetics behind them telling them what to do, in certain scenarios. And that's why they're such a high functioning dog independently without a human being telling them what to do. Um, I think one of the obstacles to overcome with, adding livestock guardian breeds to a band dog program is most people do not want a double coated dog. They're looking for a short coated dog. So trying to add the mental genetics in while breeding coat out, I think is an important aspect of kind of putting these dogs in urban homes. I have a lot of livestock guardian breeds in some very interesting scenarios. They've proven to be extremely versatile. I've got a Caucasian of Charka that is guarding Galapagos tortoises, that are worth almost like $100,000 a piece. That have been stolen in the past. I've got a dog with a semi-professional surfer in California, and it's a gumper, and it stays on the beach and guards all of their wallets, keys, and shoes while they're all out surfing, and it's like a group of 30 of them. Um, so, and then I've got them in the traditional livestock guardian homes. I've got them in homesteads where they're guarding a 5-acre property with a family and a lot of livestock. I've got some that are with, on 1,000 to 2,000 acres with 400 head of sheep, and they're guarding a whole herd. And I've seen, or, just your average, family home where there's 3 or 4 young kids and they're guarding the kids. And they've proven to be extremely versatile in all scenarios. You can bond them to people, you can bond them to a property, you can bond them to a fence line, you can bond them to a building, you can bond them to livestock. Um, and I think it adds a lot to a band dog program where, the original band dog was supposed to be, a dog that was chained during the day and let loose at night to guard kind of small farm type properties. I mean, I think the barking's a plus. They're barking to deter things, and that's their job. But yeah, the hair is the most common thing that people come out to the property. They look at all these different breeds of dogs, and they're like, I don't want a double coated dog. I don't want to deal with the shedding in my house. So, yeah, definitely breeding that out. Although in a farm type scenario, I actually think it's a major benefit. So, But when you're looking at an indoor dog, you definitely that's a negative. So I encounter that problem a lot because there'll be a certain dog, one of my breeds that, somebody comes to me and they've already got their heart set on that. And I've got that right now. I just did a very flashy color breeding, but there's some very serious guard dog genetics behind that breeding. Havoc de Toledo is the Presa I used, and he's a monster. So, and that's 50% of the bloodline in this breeding is him, and he's a beast. He's got a ton of prey drive. So, you know, you're gonna need probably a more experienced owner, or somebody that understands prey drive as the thing. I had somebody text me the other night that's been following my page. I've been talking to them. They own a 5-acre homestead. They've got a ton of livestock, a ton of chickens and birds. And I just did a Central Asian breeding. Those puppies are like 15 weeks old. So initially we'd kind of talked about them getting a Central Asian for their farmstead as a guard dog, but also, something that's livestock neutral. And they just saw, the puppy pictures I just put out, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I want that dog." They love the Harlequin Dalmatian look. But that dog's not going to be okay with, a bunch of birds running around. The birds would have to be contained, or the dog's going to have to be contained, because that prey drive that the Presa brings into the breeding is not going to be okay to be running loose with a bunch of chickens. So I've got a lot of stuff going on with the farm right now. So I've got I've got a lot of projects with that, and a lot of my money is being channeled towards that. Um, if I have enough extra this year, I'd like to add an indoor kennel. And that'll be more for my board and trains and my training program than my breeding program. All of my dogs are okay to be outside in 110-degree heat, or in -5-degree weather, which those are about the extremes of what we're getting in this part of Texas. In terms of breeding, like I said, I've got a lot of color breedings that I'm doing this year. Four of them that are adding Harlequin and Merle into my program. And then, kind of after that is doubling down on temperament, making sure my temperament's still all good. Genetically, in terms of genetic diseases, I've been only using clear dogs, or only keeping clear dogs. So that's, no longer something I have to worry about. I can breed any dog to any dog without having to worry that, one's a carrier and one's a clear. They're all clears, and opens up uh that opens up so many opportunities in terms of breeding, because you're not limited by, any kind of genetic. You can breed any dog you want to any other dog you want to, based on other factors. But basically, in the next year, after adding color, is going back and making sure that we have all the temperament that we set out to achieve, structure. And then from there it's line breeding, to double down on these genetic traits that we have selected, and develop a type and consistency within that, so that every dog we produce starts to look the same. So once I have that, kind of achieved, then we'll start dropping the first dogs that we're actually marketing as a Lone Star Mastiff.
So what does genetic testing mean to you?
So like embarking every dog, making sure that they're clear of all genetic diseases. You can be a carrier, or an affected. Affected should never be bred in any breeding program. They should be removed from the gene pool. Um, if you've got a carrier, then you have to be very certain you're only breeding it to a clear. Um, And then when you're picking puppies to keep back for yourself in your own breeding program, you need to make sure you're only keeping clears, um, so that, you know, in the future you only have clears. That's, the goal when looking at genetics, in terms of genetic diseases. There's still, the embark is the top of the line in terms of, the amount of different tests or diseases that they test for. There's still a long way to go, though. Um, if you're very familiar with genetics, you have a Punnett square in that, Mendelian genetics, where that's the basis. You learn this in biology classes and probably in grade school, where they bred, dominant and recessive genes with the P's. But in real life, when you're looking at other things, like dog genetics, it's much more complex than a Punnett square. It's more like a Punnett cube. And when you have certain genes, it activates certain other genes. So you have to have a series of maybe three genes to activate one gene. Um, and so for things like dysplasia, elbow, hip dysplasia, they're saying it's going to take them another 10 years to crack that, because there's so many different factors, so many different genes factoring in on what activates that. So, it's very interesting to keep up with the science and keep learning about these different things. It's come a long way in just the last, 6 years since I've been breeding dogs. At first it only tested for 112, and I think it's up to like 270 different genetic diseases now, and they've categorized it by breed. And you have your breed relevant condition, diseases that affect particular breeds. I'll give you the best example I know of in terms of that is um, DM with or DCM with Dobermans. That's almost wiped out Doberman pinchers as a breed. They drop dead of heart disease, and it's something that's easily fixable just by embarking your dogs. So I think that's a super important thing for any breeder to do. I won't do a puppy swap. I won't do a pup back. I won't buy a dog unless it's a genetic clear. So there were quite a few breeders that got dogs from that were American Molosses, with the intent of setting out to breed, and they were so unhealthy that they couldn't be bred, that they didn't live long enough to even be bred. Um, Looking at all kinds of genetic diseases, so bad that even like there were a couple lifelong breeders that decided to stop breeding because it was kind of such an awful experience dealing with that, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone, especially not anybody that's paying me for a dog. Um, you know, it's just wrong. While I think, embarking, I think it's become so easy and affordable that I think it should be done on every dog. It does not substitute for understanding your lines. There are something, like I said, hip dysplasia, that doesn't test for that. There's skin conditions, a lot of things that if you breed enough dogs, if you know your lines, if you continue breeding the same lines and you do it for a long enough period of time, you will see other problems that no embark test is going to pick up on. And that's on you to breed conditions like that out, or decide that's not a line that you can use in your program or that you should be breeding. So I don't, it's not a replacement for experience, I guess is what I'm trying to say. um nothing will ever beat the experience gained through time and time testing, basically. I think a lot of working dog breeders are um, more understanding of the fact that not every dog is going to be a working dog. Not every dog, just because it was born doesn't mean that it deserves to be, to be a working dog, or certainly not every dog should be bred. And um, they're more understanding to possibly culling a dog. Now, what that means, that's another subject. Whether that means it just goes to a pet home and is spayed or neutered, but definitely shouldn't be adding back into the gene pool. And you've got all these hip and elbow testing companies that make a lot of money off of this testing. And I think there's a lot of working breed people, especially have been doing it. If you've been doing it 20, 30 years, you can look at a dog, watch it run, and know, or like if it's like a German Shepherd or a Malinois, and you're doing bite work with it, you can watch it take off running and um, you know leap in the air to bite someone, and you can instantly see if it's got movement issues, structure issues, and it's not going to hold up. Like, it's same as a human body. If you're working out all the time and you're, very physically active and doing all these things, you're going to be a much stronger individual. Or like, you compared to a pro athlete, there are genetic examples that are just going to be superior, and you can see that in a working dog, because anything less than that's going to crumple and fail.
You talked about Harlequin and Merle. Are you
Hmm.
ready for the blowback on that? I'm a
uh,
big fan. I'm a big fan of it.
so I mean, yes, I expect there to be quite a bit of blowback. People that are gonna be like, okay, now you're really only breeding for profit, you're only color breeding. That's not the case. And it's the last thing I've added into my genetic program. um, but I mean, that does sell puppies that people want. They want quality. They want, so it's like looking at like a Lamborghini or something. If you're buying a sports car, it's got to look as well as it performs. It's got to look good too. um, and so that's part of having the whole package. And I don't want to be losing money to other breeders that are doing, just because it doesn't have the color. I will say that having trying to find dogs that you're adding into your genetic pool that have those colors is difficult, because most of the other people breeding these dogs are not breeding them for temperament, are not breeding them for structure. They're only breeding for profit and color. So you have to be very diligent in who you're, as a breeder, who you're getting a dog from, and making sure that that dog has been tested to some degree. And that if you're gonna, I mean, you can breed, the colored genes are actually pretty simple compared to a lot of the other ones. So you can breed it in fairly easily, and then breed out the original breed that you brought the color in with. It just takes a long time. It's a process. Um, but you know, I'll be keeping puppies off this litter that I just recently had, and then this upcoming litter that I'm also having, that's going to be a Merle breeding. And I'll be evaluating them, and then making an assessment from there, and tweaking the genetics. If I have to wait an extra 2 years before releasing the dog, and it takes me 4 years instead of 2 years to get the Lone Star Mastiff off the ground, that's what I'll do. If I have to do 10 more breedings to get it where I'm happy with the temperament, that's what I'll do. um, you know you if you're gonna go that route, you gotta be willing to put in the time and kind of deal with the consequences of adding the color. But that's certainly not the most important thing, but it is important in terms of keeping it as a business, because like we talked about earlier, I mean, these dogs are big, they eat a ton of food. it's a lot of money, especially when you have 30 of them to keep them all fed. And if if your dogs aren't selling, um, that's a problem. So if the only reason is that they're not selling, then you need to add color in to make sure that they sell, and you can afford to feed all 30 dogs that are dependent on you. Um, and like I said, it's not a complicated gene thing. It's a little bit of research, and you can understand it, and you can get it to where every litter is a colored litter.
And I think I saw you using some Great Dane.
I am. I will say that that's been a struggle, because they don't typically have a temperament that I like. Um, so been using Great Dane and Catahoula, um, to add in the color, and then from there it's going back, and also you're sacrificing the size on the bone structure. Great Danes are very tall, but they have very twig like leg structure. So using that, and it being a mainly Mastiff program, want to make sure that you have dense bone structure. That's another thing with the Prices too. They have such an excellent temperament, in terms of their prey drive and their defense drive, and just being a nasty dog. But their overall size and bone structure is not that of most Mastiff breeds. And they're a smaller dog, which is why they're more athletic. So, when you add that in, and on this like current litter, it's 50% Price and 25% Great Dane. I'm gonna have some thinner legged, taller dogs. And then, it'll be up to me to go back and then take it to a really heavy set dog, which will most likely be heathen, if I've got females, or um, Shadow or Cherokee, which are some heavy neo dogs that I've got with a little bit of English in them. To bring back in that bone structure and that heavy setness. Um, and that it's a fine line, because you don't want them to be too heavy set to the point where they're unathletic, and can't run. So it's a balancing game all the way around. In terms of band dogs, a lot of the Czechoslovakian kennels are consistently producing great dogs, that have a lot of neo in them. But there's not that many in America, that have retained their working value. There's way too much of charging by the wrinkle and looking for extreme size, extreme jowls at the cost of health and workability. Um, and if you look at Italian Mastiffs, like before it separated into Cane Corso and Neapolitan Mastiff, when it was just the Italian Mastiff, and you go back then and you look at them, those dogs don't have near the jowls. They are tall dogs. They're athletic, and they have much longer snouts, than what you typically see, and they're not super I mean, they have wrinkles, but they're nothing like some of the wrinkly dogs you see today, where even their legs, their joints, have folds of skin and wrinkles hanging off of them. um I don't think kind of the way that people prefer a neo these days, is really is healthy or conducive to the breed at all.
What does the art of the deal mean as a dog breeder? Do you work with other breeders, and are you able to work out deals where maybe the average customer would not be able to make because you do have enough stock and that they could use, and has that helped your program as far as is not having as much upfront cost?
Absolutely. I've definitely got a group of breeders that I train with that we swap dogs out. We all like each other's bloodlines. We have similar goals. And there's value, and that's part of the health thing, is that making sure that you're not overly line breeding, and that you are still, you have enough new blood coming in, and that requires you to work with other people. um, Generally, like I've got my people in the breeding community, but generally I don't prefer to work with other breeders or new breeders. I like to work with trainers and people who are going to work the dogs, because I think that having I think that as a breeder, it's hard to be a breeder and a trainer, and it's you need other people to that can put in the time, because if you're really doing right by breeding, you're putting a lot of time into that, and it's always better if you can take somebody that's a full-time trainer that they're gonna maximize the potential on your dog. um, or if it's you're talking about like livestock guardian dogs, some of these properties that I put my dogs on, they have, like I said earlier, 2-3 thousand acres, and I mean it's their livelihood. So they're depending on my product, and it really tests the dog. And so I do prefer to see my dogs in those kind of homes versus a breeding home. But you can't be a breeder and not have people in the industry that you're working with and you trust, um, because you can't keep every dog. um, so you have to have other people, and you can't keep line breeding. I mean, you can only do it so many times before you start introducing new health problems.